Welcome to the CEO and the Salesman Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Whyatt. I'm the salesman part of the title. Each week, I sit down with CEOs and entrepreneurs to discuss and dissect their journeys, filled with triumphs, challenges, and some good old-fashioned business wisdom. Get ready to laugh, learn, and be inspired as we dig into leadership, strategy, sales, marketing, and everything in between. This is the CEO and the Salesman Podcast. Let's get on with the show. Welcome to the CEO and the Salesman Podcast. My name is Matthew. I'm your host, and today we're joined by a very special CEO, or the disabled CEO, Michael Maher. G'day, Michael. How are you going?
Good morning.
Hey, we were just having a conversation before we went live, and I wanted to continue that. So you asked me about Bob Urachuk. Now, Bob Urachuk was a salesman and was voted in the top 10 salesmen for about a decade. And we went to an event. Now, we've just literally just figured out that we might have crossed paths in Bali 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, that's right. Small world. Such a small world.
Yeah, that's right. How did you see that I knew Bob Urachuk?
I had a look at your profile, and it's an interesting name. It stands out. You don't see many who say, I know Bob Urachuk. Not in Australia anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, actually, this is so the story of how I created and built a relationship with Bob is of course, I met him in Bali at a entrepreneur business school a long, long time ago. And I think that's where we met,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure. Now, I remember, so back in the day, I wanted to be a sales trainer and sales coach. And so I remembered that I had met this guy named Bob from Canada, many, many years ago. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And I messaged him and said, Bob, I'm starting a podcast. Would you be interested in being interviewed? Which was my cunning and devious plan, just to be able to have an excuse to talk to him, because, you know, these are in this rarefied air of top 10 salespeople in the world voted, decades in a row. So he said yes, and then of course I had to figure out how to do a podcast because I didn't really have one. Unlike this is a real podcast. The other one was not a real podcast at all. I just want to talk to this guy. How do I do it? How do I exchange value? So we had a conversation, and at the end of that conversation, I said, "Look, what are you doing with velocity selling?" He said, "Well, I'm in sort of wind down mode. We've got an online course happening." I said, "Well, I've got an idea for you. I've got a deal. I'd like to make a deal with you, Bob. How about you pay me $10,000 a month, and I'll be CEO, and I'll carry velocity selling forward?" And he said, "That's a great deal, except I'm not paying you anything." And I said, "Done." So I became CEO of Velocity Selling for about 3 years, where we launched it in LA. Bob and I spoke every week almost, and so, or probably more than every week. And over the 3 years that we worked together, it was a really great relationship. He's retired now, lucky boy, and enjoying his time off. So that's how we actually I got and built. So I've still got Velocity Selling books. I've actually got a couple of boxes of them because he sent them to me. He said, "Okay, I'm retiring. Here are the boxes. Go for it."
Such a small world, really.
Oh, man.
Canadian sales coach who rarely comes down under.
It's funny, isn't it? Hey, look, so people are probably watching this going, so Matthew's doing all the talking. So Michael says the disabled CEO. Michael, do you want to tell us your story, please? Because I think it's we've already spoken about it, but can you tell us your story? I'm really interested.
So I'm CEO of One Passport. We're workforce compliance management tech company startup based in Melbourne. I got into entrepreneurship living in Japan back from the mid-90s. I became completely unemployable, and I wanted that thrill of bringing an idea, team, and money together to build something became very, very attractive. So I've been doing this for over 2 decades. And I started One Passport in 2015. We go to achievement of 15. And then 2 years ago in July 2022, I woke up one morning and found that I had had a stroke in my sleep during the night. So I woke up, it was a Friday morning, threw back the doona, stood up, and I'm shaking my arm, saying in my head, my arm feels funny. So you're trying to rationalize what's wrong with your arm.
Yep.
And just taking 2 or 3 seconds, and my wife looked over and said, "Are you okay? And you have no pain or discomfort." So I turned to her to say, "I don't know what's wrong," and went, "Woo, woo, woo." And for the first time that day, I went in my head, "Shit, that's not good." And with the when you have a stroke, you have euphoria. You're like high as a kite. So it's like, ooh, wow. I knew I formed the words, but that sounded like a golden retriever. So my wife said, "What do I do?" So she called a nurse who works for me and said, XYZ. The nurse says stroke. Call an ambulance straight away. So we are lucky. We lived close to a hospital. So 10 minutes later, we have an ambulance. 20 minutes after that, I'm being admitted to emergency at Box Hill Hospital. And as I said, I was high, and so reality is not going. So I was meant to host a dinner for 22 entrepreneurs that night. And I was more concerned about, shit, I'm going to be a bad host. I'm not going to make my dinner. This is really bad.
That's
How
funny.
embarrassing. I had to find someone else to run the dinner. So I texted my friend, "Me stroke, big stroke, you dinner." And obviously doesn't make sense. So he
No.
calls me on the phone, and I can still hear the pregnant pause as he's trying to work out what the hell is going on. And he said, "I will call Tamaki, my wife." And a few minutes later, I got an SMS saying, "Spoke to Tamaki. I understand. I will run the dinner. Good luck with everything. We are here for you."
Yep.
Now I've pumped off the dinner. I can relax. Oh, so stroke. What do we know about stroke? And my right hand I couldn't use my right arm, so I'm trying to text with my left. Autocorrect is a bitch when you've got your spine firing, and so and the backspace key is on the opposite side of the keyboard.
Yep.
But I'm trying to work out about stroke and say, what can you do to save me? What's happening? What happens next? And you can't talk.
No.
Very scary when you're a salesman and your whole job is based on being able to talk to people.
And your brain is okay. You're able to form the whole sentence. You're able to function reasonably well, but you just can't get it out.
Yeah. So mine was front left neural lobe.
Yep.
So the area is neural pathway for speech and fine motor skills right hand. So it's still now not quite right. Chopsticks are a no-no. And I write like a doctor.
Right.
But otherwise it's getting there.
Wow. How have you, so entrepreneur, business operator, ex-army, all of this stuff going on in your life, and then to have this occur, what's been the biggest, I don't want to say the biggest lesson, sounds like a real podcast question, but I'm going to ask you anyway, what's what's been the biggest lesson? What's been the biggest thing that you've found over the last couple of years?
Whew. I guess when you're in the thick of things with the business, it's all encompassing.
Yep.
When you're suddenly sidelined with a life-changing event like a stroke and you can't speak, it puts things into perspective. I had to learn a new set of skills and go through lots and lots of rehab to be able to talk again, be able to use my right hand. I've lost my Australian accent. Everyone keeps asking, "Are you Dutch?" And I say, "No, I'm from bloody Newcastle." So having to relearn everything is very hard. But also, it's a sliding doors moment into another world. I'm disabled now. That's the title of my website and blog, The Disabled CEO. And I'm in a world with all different disabilities, and it's eye-opening in itself. But even inside the stroke, brain aneurysm world, there are guys who will never drive again, speak again, work again, have sex. The old life had gone completely. I have shit to deal with, but I can go to the gym. I can drive. I have a weird accent, but I can speak. I feel like I got off lucky, and it's humbling and emotional to go through this and have to deal with people and share this with others. I feel that we all had a role to play. Mine being a tech company CEO, I could be a voice for others who can't. So I had the team set up the website, thedisabledceo.com, with information about my journey. I blog regularly. There's resources, all the things that took me time to get together. And I'm a pretty networked kind of person. If it took me that time to do it, I can only imagine Joe Blogs, who got a normal job and not the network, trying to navigate this new reality for them. So that's why I started the blog. That's the lesson.
Yeah, got it. So when we first started the podcast, when we first started today's conversation, I had just the CEO, and you said, "Oh, well, people know me as the disabled CEO." It's a real label. How do you feel about that label, and I guess why have you embraced it so strongly?
I had this conversation with my speech therapist when I chose it as a title. I'm not hung up on the term, but I know some in the space are they don't want the label, or they are afraid of the label. Class ceilings in employment, other things that come with, oh, he's the disabled guy. I figured with my life experience, and people know me and know how I operate, know what I sounded like before a stroke, I am big enough and ugly enough to handle the label. And if I can normalize that and say, I'm disabled, but I'm still a tech company CEO, so bite me. If I can help with the attitude that others give other disabled people, I've done my job.
Very cool. So just moving on to your role as CEO, and I can imagine it would take a certain amount of resilience for you personally to have gone through the last couple of years. how do you teach resilience to your team? Because you've got a reasonably large team. You're bringing to market another product or this product. How do you talk about resilience internally? Do you?
We don't talk about it as much as, I guess I try to, with all humility, embody it. It's in this country we have the tall poppy syndrome, and you don't like to talk about yourself. You feel weird doing it. But I've seen that the effect on my staff, also on the people around us. I work in health a lot. We do workforce compliance management for regulated workforces. And a special spot is health and aged care disability workforce, doctors, nurses, carers. So I spend a lot of time with health-related people. So they see it. They're a really friendly audience once you say you've had a stroke. I'm not Dutch or drunk. Have a stroke. They're really good. But also, I've been contacted through the website by people who've had a stroke at the executive level, and they want to go back to work. They say, I'm disabled, not dead. My brain's fine. I had to relearn to walk or talk, but the brain's firing fine. It seems that many people who go through this either retire or take a lower level job. So having role models or people that they can point to for their employer and say, that guy stayed in his role. I want to go back to my role. It's been really good to know. Hopefully I've helped those conversations for people.
Yeah, cool. Okay. And so when it comes to your current business, do you ever come across people who are not willing to do business with you, or do you feel that in 2024 people are reasonably okay or accepting of how you speak and how you operate?
I find people are very accepting. Part of my speech conditions, one of them is you have trouble forming sentences. So grammar, I'm much better now, but especially a year ago, lining up the words on the correct order was hard. So you didn't make sense sometimes, but also you use emotional words like fuck, shit, they just pop out. So when I was starting meetings, I was having to say, I have to give you a content warning. Part of my speech condition from the stroke is this apraxia, and my brain's trying to find the shortest way to get the message across. So I might say, that's fucked. Please don't take offense. It's a medical condition. And then everyone has a chuckle and it lightens the mood, gives me air cover if I do swear. And for most people, you've come back from not speaking to running a meeting or presenting to a university or a hospital. Hats off to you. So most people have been very good.
Yeah, that's very kind. Maybe my ex-business partner had that issue. He was a Frenchman, and even though he lived in Australia for 25 years, he would go in a meeting. I remember my first meeting with him because he was in marketing, and this is before he was a partner of mine. He was just trying to sell me his. He wanted us to do his website, him to do our website. And he's French, and he goes, "Well, Matthew, I don't know how you say your website is shit." And I went, But what's interesting about
Direct.
that is, yeah, very direct, very French. But and he knew the word. I think he leaned into the accent. He lived in Sydney for 25 years. You don't have a deep French accent after that amount of time. I think he just liked telling people that their websites were shit. so people would then go ahead and go, oh well, I guess you've got to do it, Didier. He was a funny character, that one. Hey, look, obviously, with your professional and also personally, you've had a lot of exposure to government support programs. What's your hot take, if there is such a thing, on the NDIS program?
NDIS is very complicated. It's not a pension, so you don't get pension-like payments. It's meant to give you support so you can do normal things. Unfortunately, people are ripping off left, right, and center, which makes it harder for legitimate people to access it. I don't know how they're going to sort it out. It's one of the great things living in this country. We have an underlying socialist system. Medicare, NDIS, the pension, etc., etc. The fact that in a first world country any of us can go to emergency and see a doctor for free is amazing. Many countries that either falling apart or they don't have it unless you pay. So we are lucky, but it's still got to be economical. We can't bankrupt the country to do this. So I don't know how we are going to sort that one out. They need stronger controls, I think. I've got friends who are NDIS providers, service providers, and they know people who are ripping off the system. And they move on to new providers before anyone gets to report them.
Oh, wow, okay. And so, so your main thing there is it's overly complicated, but then people who know how to rip it off, they know how to move. So, what if somebody was to come to you and said, okay, they would be able to indicate that they've had a stroke. What would be your top 5, or what would you tell them to do? What would you say they need to do first?
Probably 3 things. First, stick with rehab. When you have a stroke, public health is typically, unless they catch it within the 3 hours and you can have surgery, whether public or private. If the window of 3 or 4 hours has closed, like I was asleep, there's no surgery to reverse it. I have a dead patch. But the initial support is probably better in public as a private patient or not, but still in public. And you get a set amount of time for rehab, speech, OT, physio, whatever you need. And at the end, they say, do you want to continue? I thought that was a stupid comment. I've got no idea if I should continue. Will rehab continue to help me? I've never been here before. I was lucky I had a friend who works in this area, and she made it bloody clear, you don't stop.
Right.
You need to keep going twice a week, 6 weeks sprints, 2 months off, back for another 6 weeks for the next year or more, and then reassess. So keep going with rehab. 1. 2, many of us have private health hospital cover, but not extras anymore. I learned just again through luck of the draw. I was introduced to a therapist who had left private practice and gone to work for a hospital group in a rehab department. She spoke to their lawyers and came back and said, if your GP refers you to our rehab doctor, who refers you to our rehab department, we can claim your rehab under your hospital cover. I was looking at $15,000 to $20,000 for the year in rehab and thinking,
wow.
how am I going to pay this? Suddenly, it's $250 gap fee and the rest is covered. How many more people would do rehab if they knew that? But it's not written down anywhere. Depends on which fund you have and which cover, but they're all various versions of that. Number 3 is you have to think about your insurance. I didn't have Keyman insurance, so I thought there's nothing covering me.
Right.
But again, someone in my network said, at your age, the type of super funds that you had, the old AMP and other ones, which had life and TPD included, you might be able to claim there. So I managed to do a TPD claim on a 10-year-old super fund. And it made all the difference to me and my wife and family, just having some extra money come through the door when you're so, what's the future hold?
Yeah, very cool. Okay, good tips. And so when it comes to just talking about your software business, what often we talk about in the podcast is not necessarily sales and marketing, but if you've got some thoughts and comments on that, I'd love to hear it because you said you're a salesperson. But specifically, how do you manage how do you think about vision? How do you think about policy? How do you think about, not policy, vision and mission? How do you think about those things when it comes to business? Because I know that we've had some shared experience with EBS in Bali, so that might have coloured it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you bring your team together to get them pointing in the same direction.
We had the team is both here and overseas, and from even the guys here from multiple countries. So I always like talking about culture, not the business culture, but everyone's innate culture from Indonesia, Philippines, India, Sri Lanka, Ukraine, etc. Everyone has something different to add. And I lived in Japan for a long time, and because you're either Japanese or you're not, whereas here you can be black, white, Asian, Latino, anything, and still be Aussie. In Japan, if you're not Japanese, you're not. So you live in the expat world and you meet people from the French Quarter, the Latin Quarter, the African guys, the European guys. It's a real melting pot in every bar you go to. So I love the culture bit. So with our tech company, because tech workers from global, we try to talk about the culture. So the languages we speak, suddenly the different things that we were taught by our parents, the food, the dishes that we have and share, having a food day and everyone brings a plate, meeting the families behind the workers. We're a small business. What happens in the workplace, because of salary and time, impacts the family behind that salary. So how do we get to know and support them? And I found from that we had a very loyal team who stayed around longer than the usual turnover in tech startups.
Yeah, very cool. So sticking with the fact that we may have met 20 years ago, there's a lot of mentorship and learning around that. How do you see mentorship and learning now inside your business? And also, if you want to draw parallels to your charity or your disabled CEO position as well, because I'd say that both of those roles that you've decided to take on have an element of mentorship and learning, right?
I believe we all stand on the shoulders of those who have been before, and I've had some great mentors over the years. I've been very fortunate to have people step up to support me, train me, teach me. When the guys come to work for One Passport, I have a conversation and say, lifetime employment has gone. You will move on at some stage. My job is to make you better when you leave than when you arrive. Your job is to work your ass for us, but my job is to make you better, to teach you about life and work. So both work skills, but also life skills. So you can move on to a higher level job when you eventually leave us. In growing up in Japan, coming of age in Japan, working for a Japanese company, I was drilled on the word giri, Giri. There's no direct translation. It means loyalty, duty, fidelity, love, and it's a two-way street. You expect it from your team, but as the boss, you're meant to give it to them as well. So we have used our lawyers, our network over the years to help many of our team members from visas and immigration to issues with the police or courts because we can. And they're part of the family and we have a responsibility to support.
Very cool. And so when it comes to mentorship, do you how do you think about continuous learning? How do you think about that inside the business?
I encourage everyone to keep learning. It takes different forms. The engineers is usually courses as tech moves so quickly. For the sales guys, operations guys, try to find people who you can learn from. I in turn find people around me, from our board members to other business people I find through work or my network, who can sometimes I might be carrying their briefcase to access meetings that I wouldn't be invited in the room anywhere else. But I learned from that. Many of the skills I have, I learned that way.
Very cool. Well, look, Michael, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. It's fascinating how small the business world is, where we seem to have found some crossover there. Any thoughts or comments you'd like to leave us with?
3. When someone has a life-changing event like stroke or other things that leave them disabled, though they will probably need a bit of support, be conscious of that. They are disabled, not dead. They want to get back out there. I've seen this through many executives who have contacted me saying, my brain's fine. I want to get back to running my team. I'm not ready to sit at home. So they're disabled, not dead. Secondly, be prepared. You never know what's going to be around the corner. I was humbled many times, brought to tears many times, but the people who came to our house took me out for coffee, had one-sided conversations because I couldn't talk. I had a paper keyboard to type out letter by letter. Yes.
Right.
No. Thank you.
Wow.
But they still came every week. My neighbors saw the ambulance and mowed the grass for me. They didn't know what happened there, but they thought he needs a hand. I lost agency because I couldn't speak. So when I came back from hospital and I wanted a real coffee, I went to our local and I showed my card the hospital gave me with a stop sign and it says, stop, I've had a stroke, I can understand, but I can't speak. And he said, Michael, your order is a medium latte, 1 sugar. He had a cafe near a Oz Science school. And the students used to practice at the cafe. So he gave me agency to order my coffee again. Another tears moment.
Right.
The first time my wife and I went to dinner, the floor staff let the kitchen know, and the head chef cut up my meal and put it back together so I could eat one-handed with a fork. The humbling things that people do reinforce how kind everyone is underneath. And finally, I was drummed into me by two amazing professional people who one was assaulted and had to relearn to walk, talk, etc. And the other one has Parkinson's, and they have both risen to the top of their games. That you never give up. There's no excuse. You have a disability. So what? Get going. You never stop. So I try to honor what they drilled into me and don't stop.
Fantastic. What a great message. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. You're disabled, not dead, and never give up. I love it. Thanks very much. Bye for now.
Thank you.